Good afternoon, people. We're going to have a little bit of a chat today about hips and hip mobility. Going to have a chat about foot mechanics, okay, and then hopefully going to get you guys, as many of you as we possibly can, to send in videos or pictures or photos of the backs of your feet. So what I'll be wanting you to do is, if I stand here like this, I want you to get a photo. So your partner to maybe do it, but a photo of your feet from the back, from the ankles down, and also a photo of your feet from the front, from the sort of mid shin down, okay? And that allows me to look at your foot mechanics and to explain to you what might be happening higher up in your knees and in your hips. So your feet and how you stand, how you run, affects the mechanics of your knees and of your hips, and also actually of your back. Okay, so everything's linked in. Last week, about this time last week, I was talking about mobility in your shoulder, and I mentioned that if you haven't got decent mobility in your hips, you will struggle with mobility in the shoulder. So what I mean by that, so if you're reaching into a cupboard like this up with your shoulder, if your hips aren't working, if they can't extend through, and if you can't extend through your spine, then you have to strain with your shoulder a little bit more, and that can damage your shoulder. Equally, if your shoulder doesn't move so well and you lift up like this, then you have to lean backwards and you have to strain through your hips and your lower back. Okay, so we're linking in basically the whole body. So we're linking in from your feet to your knees to your hips to your back, and then to your shoulder, and again your shoulder is linked with your neck. So if we can get everything moving, if we can get all the joints in your body moving to an optimum performance, that means that will decrease the likelihood of you getting injuries throughout your body. Now, with all of those kind of movements, then you add in strength, which is what Mark's given you: strength, endurance, stamina, as well as flexibility through the movements, and range of motion through all the planes. So we have three planes. We have the sagittal plane working through this way, where you do weights like this. We have the frontal plane on the side to side, and we have a transverse plane working all the way. And what Mark's doing is he's working you through all those planes. When you do yoga with Mary, she works you through all three planes as well. All right. When we do the stretching, I did a stretching session on the lower limb a few weeks back, and I was talking about how you stretch through all three different planes as well. Okay, so if we can get everything working like that, if we can get the strength, the flexibility, the stamina, the endurance, the range of motion in all the joints, then that radically decreases the likelihood of you getting any injuries, radically increases your immune response, okay, allows you to sleep better, allows you to move better, allows you to perform better, allows you to live longer. Okay, so we're going to talk about the hip a little bit now. So we're talking about this hip joint. Now the hip is very different, although it is a ball and socket joint, slightly different to the shoulder, and it's different because it's load bearing, it's weight bearing. Unless we start walking around on our hands doing handstands and handstands to Tesco's and back, this actually isn't a weight bearing joint, and that's why the arm is smaller than our leg. Okay, our leg, we're stood upright and our force is pushing down against this leg here, this thigh in fact, and that makes it bigger. Yeah, so the bigger the bone, the more force there is going through it, or the more force that goes through a particular bone, the bigger and the stronger it gets. Okay, so the hip is a ball and socket joint. Okay, it can move in all ranges of motion. All right, unlike the shoulder I can do a big circumduction. You can't do that with the hip. You can kind of hurdle with it, but you can't swing it all the way around. Okay, because it's a much more stable joint than the shoulder joint. So we're much more likely to get injured in our shoulder than we are in our hips. But because of the load in the hips, because we're stood up against it all our lives, it makes it prone to wear and tear. And when I talk about wear and tear, I'm talking about osteoarthritis. Now, I just turned 54 last week, and I have already osteoarthritis in my hips, which is interesting because I've only really cycled quite a lot, but I am carrying excess weight, and that excess weight puts a big strain on my joints. All right, if I lose weight, that unload those joints. So that's what I'm trying to do at the moment. I'm trying to lose weight, improve the strength of my body, to improve the health of this joint here. And this joint here also affects directly my lumbar spine. All right. So if I get problems in my hip joints, okay, I will get problems in my back. Okay. If any of you have got back problems, there will be an issue in your hips as well. They work together. They work synergistically. That's what we call it, in synergy, in coexistence, if you like. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through some hip mobility for you. Okay. Again, if you've just joined us, I asked you earlier on, right at the start, if you have a look at the start of this video, I asked you about taking pictures of your feet. Again, that's for foot mechanics, foot health, but that your feet are in contact with the ground. And if they're in a particular angle, this way or that way, they can have a knock-on effect further up the chain, right, further up through your knees, through your hips and in your back. And if there is a problem with your feet, then we need to sort of address that so that we can take the pressure off those joints further up. Okay, so if you pop back to that right at the start later on, and send me your photos or put them on the End Zone VIP page, I can discuss and annotate them and tell you what I think might be going on, and what problems you may have, what particular stretches you could possibly do to help with that, or what strengthening you can do as well. Anyway, back to this mobility. So our friend here is going off now, and what I'm going to do to you, show you, is some flexibility work that I'd like you to try. Now, I want to talk about the Michelle Pfeiffer last time, so you're going to find a place that you can hang on to and go down first thing in the morning and do this rocking motion. And this rocking motion gets your hips moving. Now you're on your toes, so it's not a squat in this position. You're on your toes and you're trying to rock through. Now this helps again with the stretching through your plantar fascia and your feet. Helps a little bit with your ankles. Definitely helps in the groin and your hip, and your groin and your hips work together. Your butt muscles is part of your hip. Yeah, so your buttocks, your glutes, they're part of your hip. They're massive stabilizers of your hip. So you're going to use your training with Mark, like hip thrusters, to strengthen the glutes, or the hips really. But in the morning, first thing, to wake things up, to get things moving, you're going to do a variety of these hinging hip movements. Yeah, so anything with a hinge in, so a squat, yep, is hip movement. Okay, that squat down like this, and I noticed this the other day. So my squat, I used to be able to get much lower than this, and I think the reason why that has decreased recently is because I'm doing much more sitting, because I'm at home more. Yeah. So again, if you can avoid sitting for whatever reason, if you can volunteer to do washing up perhaps, but try and get some squats in. So there's deep squats. In this position, I don't really want you on your toes and squatting down. I want you on your heels and squatting down. Now, that might identify a problem in your ankles, but again, try that deep squat, and then if there's an issue with your ankles, then at another stage I can show you how to mobilize your ankle joints, okay? But in this case, we're going to squat down like this, and then we want to try and open up our hips a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some weights. So I'm going to bring it a little bit closer here. Hopefully you can see the door there. Just drop that down a bit. And I'm going to sit with my back, in this case, up against the door. And I'm going to open up my hips again. Again, you might have done this with Mary, with the yoga. But you're going to open up your hips like this. Pushing down. Trying to keep my back straight up the wall. Again, shrugging my shoulders and then pushing down through the tops of my knees here to open myself up. What I like to do, because I've got some dumbbells here, is I like to encourage that movement at the hip, that hip opening, by using quite a heavy dumbbell on either one of my knees. Be careful, you're actually going to feel a stretch deep in your groin here. Okay, so if you had a hernia or you've got any problems in your groin here, just be a little bit careful. Okay, I'm going to put these weights on here, just let them rest. And I'm just going to sink in. And again, with most stretching, You're going to follow your breath. You could even add this into a little bit of concentration on your breath, which is almost on the edge of a meditation. And I'm just letting those thighs, those hips, open up now. So this is a huge external rotation of your hip. Okay, lots of people do this. Now we're going to take that out very gently. I'm going to come back in because this has been quite a big stretch. I'm going to bring my legs in like this, close them up, bring them down, shake out my hips a little bit. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an internal rotation. So I'm turning my knee inwards, the other one's either bent or straight depending on your flexibility there. So I'm turning in, trying to get back up with my back against the side here. Again, trying to get a right angle between my leg and my thigh, and then I'm going to take a weight. you can just have it without the weight if you want, but I'm going to take a weight, so I need a little bit more pressure down through the hip joint. Pop it on my knee, try and sit up a little bit more, trying to get my bum towards the door, and breathe into it. And I'm not going to hold that for anywhere between 20 seconds and a minute, just to create that, what's called internal rotation of the hip. Not many people do this. You might find it difficult to start with. There's no rush, okay? But this will help with your lower back, this will help with your hip, this will help with your knee, general mobility overall. Very few people direct flexibility or range of motion to this kind of movement in the hip. And because you've got this group time, because you're doing yoga, because you're doing all the exercises that you're doing with Mark and with Charlotte now, this will really help you. This will really help your improvement with your sort of mountain climbers as well. So that's been enough for that. So I'll take that off, open that out. Just maybe flex that around. I can feel there's a much greater range in my hip there. And I'm going to move on to my other hip. Otherwise, if I don't do that, I'll be running around in circles. Again, this one's a little bit tighter. My right hip for me is a little bit tighter. There's always some asymmetries. My when I stood up, or when I stand up rather, my left leg is longer than my right. And that's normal. We all have one leg longer than the other. We all have one arm that's dominant over the other, so one's stronger than the other. My right leg, I kick a ball with my right leg. If I kick a ball with my left leg, it just goes everywhere. So my right leg dominant, right arm dominant for me, but my left leg's longer. And my left shoulder actually drops with my left leg being longer. But anyway, so right leg's a little bit tighter, the hip. It's difficult for me to get a right angle at the knee. So I'll go as far as I can and just keep that weighted down. And that just gets the mobility. If you notice that I'm a bit more twisted, because again, I haven't got that mobility on this side. So that's about enough for me on that side. Oh, I was going to take that out. Oh dear. And again, I'm going to bring myself up into this sort of feet together. So the soles of my feet are pushing together like that. I'm trying to open out as much as I can. Yeah. Push down. Open out. And because this right side's a little bit tighter, I'm going to try a bit of distraction on it. And the way I can do that, so I'll just come up here if I can get off the floor, is I'm going to use a band, so banded distraction. This only works, of course, if you've got a band. It's not really, it's difficult to do it with anything else. So I'm going to take this band, it's attached to something that shouldn't move, step into it, and I'm going to bring it right up into the crease line of my hip joint here, on the right, and then I'm going to lean, I don't know if you can see that, just take that a little bit to there like that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of lean, this knee's fixed, this band is pulling here, so I'm getting a bit of a distraction at the joint like this. Okay, I'm going to lean there. You can bounce into it a little bit, yeah. You can make it a bit tighter, so if I move away you might not see me in shot, but you can see the band pulling. Okay, and that is just gliding the joint through the hip. I can bring it to the side to make a more distraction through the side of the hip here. Come out like this a bit. I can move like that, and that's now pulling up into the joint, gapping that. Okay, so come out there. So if you do all of these movements, and then try moving your hips around in circles, try going down into a deeper squat. I've got a little bit more